He has risen. He has risen indeed. I hope you had a great weekend. We got to church for the first time in a year. It was wonderful. We sat outside under blankets. It was cold where I am in Middle Georgia on Sunday, and yet we went. I also was able to go on Fox and Friends Sunday morning before church to talk about the Major League Baseball boycotting Georgia. Of course, there is a lot with that that we need to get to. We'll get into the Ron DeSantis stuff, infrastructure, maybe even talk Kong versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus Kong and community organizing and boycotts. We'll get there. But first, the phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We begin with some audio from Governor Brian Kemp, who has gone on offense after the Major League Baseball decided to pull the All-Star game out of Cobb County. Now, press reports say that baseball really didn't have a choice, that they were going to have players refuse to play in Georgia if they came. The governor is standing up for Georgia.
Well, certainly everybody wants to bake in to the people of our state and everyone around the country that's what's going on here. And, I'll let the legislators speak for themselves, but I know myself, our team, a lot of the legislators we were working on. And listen, I realize people have all kinds of different of opinions and beliefs about the 2020 election. But make no mistake, there were issues that happened on the election, like they do in every election. This year, obviously, there was more of a spotlight than ever, and I think one of the reasons was the pandemic, and it changed a lot of things. We had a brand new system in Georgia. We had things like drop boxes that we've never used, at least in recent memory. Therefore, there were mechanical issues that needed to be fixed. There were reasons to try to figure out a better way, a more accessible way, in a more secure way for us to hold elections. And there is nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't apologize for wanting to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Less easy to vote and harder to cheat, then maybe there's an argument for boycotts and protests and moving all-star games. But that is not what happened. What happened was Georgia is going to have secure, very accessible and fair elections in the future in this state.
The New York Times, I know a lot of smart people who are circulating the New York Times review of Georgia's election law, and they are convinced by the New York Times reporting that Georgia is trying to Republicans are trying to steal it because they're getting rid of long-held Georgia election laws. But as Governor Kemp and others in Georgia have pointed out, the New York Times is actually misrepresenting Georgia law and diluting its readers. Now, its readers should know this, but they don't really care, I think, a lot of them. For example, one of the things the New York Times focuses on are the drop boxes. The drop boxes are actually not under Georgia, not in accordance with Georgia law, that you can't use drop boxes except because of Governor Kemp's emergency order related to the pandemic. Specifically, Governor Kemp's emergency order said to follow federal guidance, including from the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security, during the pandemic, advocated the use of drop boxes and put out guidelines to make it healthy and safe to vote. And one of the things they did was say drop boxes. When the governor's order expires, his language on compliance with stuff like that goes away. And so all of the drop boxes go away. All of the drop boxes go away. What will then therefore happen is you won't have a drop box. But the Georgia legislature decided to legislate drop boxes, so the drop boxes will stay. If you read the New York Times analysis, it sounds like they're scrapping drop boxes, which are some longtime fixture of Georgia law. They're not. Again, when the governor's order expires on the pandemic, there will be no drop boxes in Georgia. What the legislature should do is they should come back into special session in Georgia and say, you know what, we're going to get rid of all the language about drop boxes. And then watch the belly aching, because then the media will blow a gasket realizing they've just ensured that there will be no drop boxes when the governor's order expires. The New York Times has willfully misrepresented this. To its credit, Georgia Public Broadcasting has done a better job. But let's focus on something else the New York Times said that has people up in arms. That, yes, the state elections board will be able to take over local county election operations. Yes, that's true, but there's a caveat you would never know from reading the national press. It will require, in order for the state elections board in Georgia, I've actually read the legislation, surprise, in order for the state elections board in Georgia to take over a local elections board, there have got to be a couple of things that happen. One, there have to be at least 3 complaints filed about the conduct of 2 election cycles, 2 general election cycles. So we're talking 2020 and 2022. So it's going to be over a 2-year span. There've got to be 6 total complaints, and an independent review will have to show that the local superintendent did nothing to address those complaints to fix the problem. If an independent review board can look at the 2-year period to see that the local county election superintendent did not clear up the problems, then the state elections board can take over and find a new election superintendent, cannot control it for more than 9 months, and can only do 4 at a time. That's the actual rule. Also, counties can ask the state elections board to take over. And again, there can only be 4 taken over at one time and only for 9 months. That's it. But it's got to be a 2-year span to fix problems. Now, the left conspiratorially, much like the QAnon folks, are saying, well, Cobb, Gwinnett, Fulton, DeKalb, look, they're going to take over those big 4. Those are Democratic county strongholds. Well, let's focus on Fulton. The Fulton County Board of Elections has repeatedly hired and fired the same people to run its elections. They have repeatedly had problems. Even the Democrats agree that the Fulton County Board of Elections has problems. So, okay, if they want to take it over, Democrats and Republicans alike agree. Now, here's something else that is specific and missed in the national conversation by people who have no clue. This takeover proposal was actually a bipartisan proposal until they lumped it into one piece of legislation, very much like the absentee ballots. The absentee ballots in Georgia, this is another one that the New York Times is screaming about. Absentee ballots in Georgia will now have to have the application filed 11 days before the election. The U.S. Post Office says it should be 13 days. Georgia's going to make it 11 days. You got to have your application in. This was actually another bipartisan piece of legislation that was supported by Democrats and Republicans in the state house as a standalone provision. It passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. It moved to the Senate and it was folded into the larger elections package. It is now being used by the left and the media to say Georgia is somehow trying to cheat. Never mind that this was a bipartisan proposal that passed with a bipartisan consensus in the state house, only to be lumped into the larger package. They're using bipartisan issues in Georgia that were in the ultimate package to claim some sort of grievance. They're willfully distorting what happened. And if you only read the New York Times, of course, you're never going to know this, but that's the point. The New York Times doesn't care about the honesty of the situation. And frankly, most of the people reading the New York Times don't really care about it either. All of this then precipitated Major League Baseball pulling out of Cobb County for the All-Star game. A little more on Governor Kemp. You heard his press conference, and then he started the media tour.
It means cancel culture and partisan activists are coming for your business. They're coming for your game or event in your hometown. And they're coming to cancel everything from sports to how you make a living. And they will stop at nothing to silence all of us.
That was the end of the press conference, and then he went on with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, Tucker, this is unbelievable. I mean, really unfortunate today, obviously, that Major League Baseball has folded up and caved to the cancel culture and a bunch of liberal lies, quite honestly. And what's even more sad is the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and people like Stacey Abrams labeling the Election Integrity Act Jim Crow. This is what happens. You know, now you have a lot of small business owners, a lot of great baseball fans, including myself, are getting deprived of having the All-Star game in Atlanta because of a cancel culture. And I think it's a message to all of us all across this country that are at home tonight. They're coming after you next. You know, they're going to come after your ball game. They're going to boycott your business. if you don't agree with their way of life, they're going to come after you on that too.
But I mean, it's shocking. I agree with you completely. But why are Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola getting involved in the details of a voter fraud bill? And why doesn't someone just say, make your little diabetes-causing soft drinks, fly your little airplanes? Why don't you stay out of democracy? Why do they think they have the right to dictate what a bill in the Georgia legislature that's nothing to do with their businesses contains?
Well, look, it's so hypocritical, too. It's just like Major League Baseball, headquartered in New York. Delta's flying to New York. I'm sure Coca-Cola sells a lot of product in New York. Well, you look at New York's voting laws. You have to have an excuse to vote absentee by mail in New York. You do not in Georgia. Just if you want to vote absentee here, you can do it. We have 17 days of in-person early voting before the election for people to participate. We now have 2 more optional days if counties opt into that on Sundays that was in this bill that's actually expanding access for voting opportunities early. New York has 10, so we have either 7 or 9 days more than New York, where Major League Baseball is headquartered.
The governor probably is going to win re-election on this. In Georgia, Republicans have been deeply divided over Brian Kemp, largely because Donald Trump and Governor Kemp went head-to-head over the outcome of the election. Donald Trump was upset Governor Kemp did not call a special session of the legislature. He was amplified by David Schaefer, the Republican Party chairman in Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia. Federal Supreme Court precedent and state Supreme Court precedent in Georgia has long held that if you change the election laws in the run-up to an election, you can't enforce them until after the election. So it would not have done any good to have a special session, but the people calling for the special session missed that and did not say it. So a lot of people are under the impression the governor of Georgia could have done more. In fact, the governor of Georgia is precluded under the state constitution from doing anything in an election. He has no power within an election. That's all the Secretary of State. But Republicans, as a result of all of this misinformation, they're deeply divided on the governor. There was a poll out I saw, an internal private poll circulating among the Republican leaders showing that the governor cannot unite the Republican base. No one can beat him in a primary, but he can't unite the base enough in the general to be able to stop Stacey Abrams. This probably helps him. Stacey Abrams has been out for a while now, encouraging corporations to take a stand. They listen to her and boycott Georgia. She's like, I didn't mean that. I mean, take a stand, but don't boycott us. That's her position now. Raphael Warnock, of course, went on CNN and was given the opportunity to denounce the idea of boycotts and refused to denounce it. They've now done so, and he's only now like, they shouldn't have done this after refusing to call for them not to beforehand. This helps Brian Kemp, I suspect. I think it helps him in Georgia. Republicans in Georgia, my sense from being in Georgia, is that Republicans are suddenly really, really united in a way they had not been, which, again, reminds me to tell you, as I always say, events change things. Events completely change things. In Georgia, they have certainly changed things for the GOP. You've got a lot of Democrats now screaming about these boycotts, but it was the Democrats themselves whose rhetoric called for it. The mayor of Atlanta, though, is one of the lone exceptions. The mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, of course, she's got no love lost with the Braves because they packed up and moved to Cobb County. She's out saying, well, your vote had consequences. This is it. More of this, please, or some such on social media. She's actually advocating even more boycotts against the state of Georgia. The Republicans in the state are suddenly unified, and there are more of them than there are the Democrats, and that has the Democrats concerned.
He doesn't just have a radio show.
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. You can call us 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I actually am really curious if anybody out there is going to stop drinking Coke or fly Delta or stop watching baseball because of this. Are you going to retaliate and boycott back? I want to play this audio for you again. This is Raphael Warnock, who, by the way, turns out, I said I didn't think he was really a Christian, and that got me lit up. Raphael Warnock over the weekend for Easter tweeted heresy. And for him to internalize and believe it suggests he may be a pastor, but it's something other than of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that essentially helping others get you your salvation, which regardless of the Christian denomination or theological background you're in, Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, the works alone, helping others, does not get you salvation. It's faith in Christ. That Warnock tweeted this on Easter suggests he is not actually really down with Christianity. Maybe he should, after he reads the Georgia election reform bill, actually spend some time reading the Bible, maybe, and if he claims to be a Christian pastor, because the Bible is very clear that if you claim to be a Christian pastor and you're not, you're going to get judged more harshly on the last day when the sheep and the goats are separated. And right now, I think Warnock, in culture now, goat means greatest of all time. And I want to be with the goats. He's not going to want to be on the last day. And if he doesn't change and repent and pray for some forgiveness, he's going to be. Speaking of him, I need to play this audio for you. This is him last weekend with Dana Bash. Listen to this. She asks him if corporate America should boycott Georgia.
Georgia-based corporations like Coca-Cola and Delta are facing intense criticism for not doing more to publicly oppose this law. Organizations like the PGA, the MLB are also under pressure to move high-profile events like the Masters and the All-Star Game out of your state of Georgia. Does corporate America need to be more forceful in denouncing this law? Should boycotts be on the table?
I think we all have to use our voices. And I have to tell you, as the pastor of Ebenezer Church, I've seen these corporations falling over themselves every year around the time of the King holiday, celebrating Dr. King. And yes, I think that the way to celebrate Dr. King is to stand up for what he represented, voting rights. And so we will see how all of that plays out. But I'm focused on what we can do in the United States Senate. We have a responsibility to make sure that we secure the franchise. And when we do that, we protect the democracy. And I think also we set the climate for business. We want to see people prosper, particularly who have been suffering for months under this pandemic. We need to pass this legislation, protect the right of the people to be heard in their own democracy, and to make sure that Georgia is open for business and open for voting.
So no boycotts?
Listen, I'm not focused on that. I am focused on what I can do as a United States Senator.
Dana Bash specifically asks, so no boycotts? And he says, I'm not focused on that. He doesn't say don't boycott. He doesn't say don't boycott. He says, I'm not focused on that. Here's Chris Christie talking about Stacey Abrams and her hypocrisy on this.
17 days is not enough early voting.
Well, Stacey Abrams, by the way, Stacey Abrams was in New Jersey, in my state, praising Phil Murphy this week for a voting law where New Jersey early voting is 9 days. Half of what Georgia is. Yet she's on TV in New Jersey, I saw it myself, saying that this is one of the greatest voting expansion bills we've ever seen. But this is Jim Crow? I'm sorry, George. It doesn't make any sense.
She's not.
George. Oh, she's not saying. No, she actually did. I saw the clip. We played part of the audio here of her on her Zoom call with Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey. They get 9 early voting days in New Jersey now. Georgia has 17, including 2 mandatory Saturdays and an optional Sunday. And yet Stacey Abrams is heralding New Jersey as some sort of major breakthrough. New York, you got to have a reason to vote absentee ballot. You can't just vote absentee ballot. In some states, you got to have your social security number, not in Georgia. And yet they're doing this. Now, why are they doing this? It's because of the filibuster. It has nothing to do with the truth about the law. They're trying to build a moral case to get rid of the filibuster. And so they've got to make these claims about the Georgia law to build their moral case against the filibuster. And I just don't think that that is going to fly. Now, what should Georgia do when we come back? I've got some ideas on what the state of Georgia and Texas, because Texas is now fighting this. I need to bring you up to speed on what's happening in Texas when we come back. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. Now, I'm going to spend just a moment here, and I want to introduce you guys to a new advertiser, and I want to do it here while I got your attention because you probably need this one. It is allergy season. My car is my wife convinced me I needed to move to a black vehicle, so I've got a black car now, and it's yellow. It is yellow from all the pollen, and my kid and I, we get allergy shots, and our allergies are a mess, and he stole this from me. So Eden Pure sent me an air purifier. It is a small one. It's even, you can use a USB plug and keep it in your car if you need. You can camp with it, whatever you need, and my kid stole it from me, so I had to get my own, and he swears by it. His allergies are so terrible, he turns it on in his room at night. Leaves it running most of the day, and because you've also so he's by our bathroom, and we've got the stuff in the UV light stuff for the bathroom, but occasionally you get mold and mildew and just the dust and pollen. He is allergic to pollen and dust, and he night and day difference. He's not waking up in the morning with a sore throat and runny nose thanks to Eden Pure. Now, let me tell you about this. It's an air purifier. They've got multiple models, but I've got this one, the OxyLeaf. And it's small, it's compact, it's portable. It runs in his room. You can literally smell the difference in his room with this thing running. And if you want it, go to EdenPureDeals.com and you'll get $10 off the lowest sale price. You use the code word Eric at checkout. In fact, you can click, if I'm looking at the website, if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, Eden, EDEN Pure Deals, plural.com, EdenPureDeals.com. You can see my name, click on it, and you can get this. It's a great price. The Eden Pure OxyLeaf 2 Thunderstorm Air Purifier. My son swears by it. I swear by it. My nose is congested right now. I actually had to go buy one myself over the weekend because he won't give me the one back from his room. Night and day difference for him. You need this, particularly if you're in the South where I am. When it is pollen season, everything is yellow, and you're congested constantly. This thing, again, it's portable. You can keep it in your car. You can plug it in your room. It just works. EdenPureDeals.com. Get $10 off the lowest price. It has no filters to replace. Gets rid of viruses and bacteria. Takes care of odors. Takes care of pollen. It's great. Eden Pure. The website is EdenPureDeals.com. Just click my name. Use my name, Eric, at checkout if you go to the regular site. I can swear by this product because it is a night and day difference in my house, particularly in my kid's room. I would like to say in my room as well, but again, he won't give me the air purifier back. So I had to get my own. Now, we must move on. Ilhan Omar has decided to chime in on Major League Baseball moving, and I got some overall thoughts. In fact, Fox and Friends just asked me to be on tomorrow morning to talk about what I'm about to talk to you about. But here first, Ilhan Omar.
Major League Baseball, if I could shift topics for 1 second to another issue of having to do with justice. Major League Baseball pulled the All-Star game from Georgia because of that state's new restrictive voting law, more restrictive. Stacey Abrams says she understands why people would want to boycott Georgia in protest, but that she thinks such actions hurt the working people who would be working at the Major League Baseball game, for example, and who are disproportionately minorities. Do you agree with Major League Baseball's decision, or do you side with Stacey Abrams when it comes to boycotts of Georgia in general?
We know that boycotts have allowed for justice to be delivered in many spaces. The civil rights movement was rooted in boycotts. We know that, apartheid ended in South Africa because of boycotts. And so our hope is that, this boycott will result in changes in the law, because we understand that when you restrict people's ability to vote, you create a democracy that isn't fully functioning for all of us. And if we are to continue to be a beacon of hope for all democracies around the world, we must stand our ground.
You must stand your ground. Okay. Well, here's the thing. The left in the United States of America and the media, which is decidedly of the left and decidedly peddling Democratic talking points, even opposed to the truth, have decided to target the Fortune 500. And the Fortune 500 is comfortable siding with the left in these ways because they know a couple of things. One, they know that Republican politicians aren't going to do anything to them. Republican politicians, Ted Cruz, for example, and several others are threatening to get rid of the antitrust exemptions that baseball has in American law. They're not going to. Tech companies and internet companies, the Fortune 500 and the like, they all know that Republicans aren't going to raise their taxes. They're not going to regulate them. And they also know that conservatives are not very good at boycotts. The left is very good at boycotts. The left has a more measurable impact in boycotts. What's so interesting is that these companies, including Major League Baseball, are perfectly happy to do business with China, an actual authoritarian regime that does not have voting rights for its citizens, and won't do business in Georgia, which actually just expanded early voting and passed legislation that cuts down on lines in black communities. That's right. In Georgia, precincts will have to add more machines and divide into multiple precincts if the lines are long in order to cut down on wait times. But you didn't hear that. Major League Baseball was willing to believe the lie because Major League Baseball, its major stars and its commissioner are of the left. Conservatives are going to have to figure out how to boycott. I'm reminded of Target. Remember what happened with Target? When Target decided they would let men go into women's bathrooms in Target. It was an organic reaction from conservatives, from Christians, among churches, and a whole lot of people in the suburbs who said, nope, not going to Target anymore. And Target had to modify the policy and essentially say, oops, sorry, and walk it back. Conservatives are going to have to figure out how to boycott. Now, here's the problem in the conservative movement. Now, the left likes to think of the conservative movement as way more united. The right likes to think of the left as way more united. It's always funny when I go on, for example, on HBO, Bill Maher, when I go up to Los Angeles for HBO, they'll talk about, the right's so organized and they're so nasty. And I'm thinking, wait a second, we say the same thing about you guys. Objectively, however, when it comes to economic boycotts, the left actually is more mobilized and tends to walk in lockstep on this issue. With the right, it's herding cats. You got the libertarian faction who you can't tell them what to do. You got the small government guys. You got the fiscal conservatives. You got the social conservatives. You've got the reactionaries. You've got all of these different branches of the conservative movement. Some of them are not really even conservative. They're just alt-right, not really conservative. They're nationalists who are perfectly fine with big government so long as it serves their ends and not the left's ends. But all of them together in this spectrum, and they go in different directions. It is totally herding cats. At some point, someone, some group on the right, some entity is going to need to come together and mobilize churches and conservative organizations and right-of-center coalitions to all march in lockstep towards a common goal. And one of those common goals is going to have to be the occasional deployment of a boycott, the occasional deployment of pushback across the entire spectrum of the right. The reason is because otherwise we're going to keep seeing this disproportionate retaliatory efforts by the left. Mike Pence is now at the Heritage Foundation. Kay Coles James, the president of the Heritage Foundation, has stepped down. I was one of the people who thought maybe this is an opening for Pence, and I'm increasingly thinking he should. Mike Pence, as president of the Heritage Foundation, would probably be in the best position to give voice across the right, center-right coalition to march in lockstep on occasion. Now, part of the problem with the right, though, is we've got a trust and truth deficit even on the right. The number of people, for example, who signed coalition letters to overturn the Electoral College or wanting states to ignore the Electoral College, that actually hurt them as much with conservatives as it did with the mainstream media. Occasionally, you get a group of people on the right, they seize on a fringy idea and they go over a cliff with it, and it harms the entire coalition. So what I would suggest is the right try to get on the same page selectively and on occasion, and also use the governors. Like, for example, Why haven't Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and Doug Ducey and Mike DeWine and the other Republican governors all come together and release a statement and said, hey, Major League Baseball, don't bring your all-star game here. Go to a high-tax state and punish your players. Why can't they all get on the same page? At some point, there's going to have to be someone behind the scenes who doesn't need credit for themselves who is helping coordinate a center-right effort to push back on this stuff. I'm not a big fan of boycotts. In fact, I'll tell you, when I was in college, my first boycott, when I was in college at Mercer University, there was a cable company, and the cable company only served Mercer University. It basically lost all of its customers other than the university had a long-term contract with them. Cox Cable was existing and served everywhere else in Middle Georgia. And this little, I can't even remember the name of it. It was like College Cable or something. It was a separate independent company. It was garbage. And so my first thing when I was in student government at Mercer was leading a boycott of every student on campus, cancel your cable subscription. Every student on campus, cancel your cable subscription. There were a couple of houses right off campus that had a connection. We would knock on those doors. I was the only guy on campus who didn't cancel the subscription, even though encouraging people to. Now, there was a method to the madness. Everybody wanted to come to my room to watch TV because I had the big TV anyway. So it was largely agreed, and I didn't hide it from people. I just said, look, everybody cancel it. We'll have one subscription. I've got the big TV. Y'all can come to my room and watch TV. And had an in and out policy. Anybody could come in and watch TV. All the sports games and people would crowd into my dorm room to watch. Everybody else canceled, and it worked. I don't like advocating boycotts. I don't. I like Delta, for example. I think Delta is a well-run airline. I like their service. Their food is garbage. Delta has the worst food service of any airline. They're so frou-frou, it's disgusting, but that's neither here nor there. I prefer Dr. Pepper to Coke products anyway. Dr. Pepper is not a Coke product. But at some point, it's time to get everybody on the same page. At some point, it's time to organize and mobilize conservatives to strike back peacefully in some way. And it may have to be economic. It may have to be boycotting. It may have to be that. I think it's going to have to be that, I'm afraid. Because right now the left is dominant culturally. But there's another angle here as well we've got to address, and that is if culture is upstream from politics, my friend Andrew Breitbart used to say that all the time, culture is upstream from politics. I think he got it from Paul Weyrich, that culture is upstream from politics. If you want to shape politics, you got to shape culture. The left kind of knows that. That doesn't mean ignore good cultural public policy. There is good public policy that gets ignored because the right is fighting so much in culture, they ignore the public policy fights that can be fought now that will in turn then shape culture. But above all of it, up the river, so to speak, is spiritual issues. Spiritual issues affect cultural issues, affect political issues. There is a role for churches to play in this debate. Now, churches, more and more, they don't want to be involved in politics, and I don't blame them. But there are certainly spiritual issues at stake here, and a lot of evangelical churches, in a reaction to some evangelicals going all in with Trump, have pulled completely out of politics whatsoever. So we don't do politics at all. Well, that's an abdication of their role in society to shape culture and public policy. They should in some way be, they don't have to take express advocacy for a candidate, but on cultural issues and on social issues, they should be willing to play a role instead of abdicating that role that churches have to play. A lot of churches, when the government social welfare state got so big, they said, well, we're not going to help the poor anymore. That's the government's job. They should be engaged at these spiritual levels. Someone's got to do it. Someone on the right is going to have to start herding the cats. Someone on the right is going to have to say, you know what? We're all going to have to take action here because the left is culturally dominant, and Republican politicians are going to have to figure out ways. How can we, a party that tends to be in favor of a low corporate tax and deregulation, how are we going to go after these woke corporations? If they're going to pick a side against us, we're going to have to pick sides against them. That's the reality of it. We can't unilaterally disarm in this. I am not an advocate of boycotts. I'm not a fan of them. I don't like to advocate for them. I kind of like to pick and choose who I like and do business with them without casting aspersions on others. But at some point, if we don't all stand up together, we're all going to, fall over together. We're going to hang together or hang separately, in the words of Ben Franklin. It's probably time we start figuring this out as a movement.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Erick. That's 877-973-7425.
I know you guys have been ordering the Omaha Steaks package because they told me you guys are ordering it. I'm glad you did. It's a great way to support the show, but also a great way to support Tasty Eats. Omaha Steaks Butcher's Best Sellers package is available right now. You get steak, you get pork chops, you get chicken right now if you order today. I believe that today is the last day you can do this. If you order, you'll get 4 free chicken breasts and 4 free burgers with your Omaha Steaks Butcher's Best Sellers pack. You go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar. Put Georgia in the search bar. You will see their Butcher's Best Sellers. You'll get 4 free chicken breasts and 4 free burgers at an unbelievable deal. They age their beef for at least 21 days. You get higher quality and a better value than going to your grocery store trying to buy all of this. You'll even get a dessert and side. It's an incredible package. You can get so much more at Omaha Steaks. Go to omahasteaks.com today. Put Georgia in the search bar. Get this great deal. It supports the show. It supports your stomach. It supports good eats. And thanks to Omaha Steaks for taking a chance on the show and advertising with us. Remember, use Georgia in the search bar at Omaha Steaks to get this deal. The Chinese Communist Party, this is from the Daily Wire. The Chinese Communist Party is reportedly detaining Christians in secret facilities and forcing them to renounce their faith or face being tortured for months. A member of a Christian house church in the southwestern province of Sichuan, who asked to be identified by the pseudonym Li Yui's, said he was held in a facility run by the ruling Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department, working in tandem with the state security police for 10 months after a raid on his church in 2018, Radio Free Asia reported. Another Christian who asked to remain anonymous told RFA that similar facilities are being used across China, not just for Protestants, but also for members of the underground Catholic Church and the banned Falun Gong spiritual movement, a target of authorities since 1999. Radio Free Asia is a nonprofit broadcasting corporation funded by the U.S. Agency for Global Media, an independent federal government agency. The communists reportedly focus mostly on targeting house churches that are not members of the communist-backed Three Self-Patriotic Association, which teaches people a communist-approved version of Christianity because it views Christianity as a national security threat. It was a mobile facility that could just set up in basement somewhere. It was staffed by people from several different government departments. It had its own communist political and legal affairs committee working group, and they mainly target Christians who are members of house churches. They use really underhanded methods. They threaten, insult, and intimidate you. There were United Front officials, men, women, sometimes unidentified, usually in plain clothes. The police turn a blind eye to this. You have to accept the statements they prepare for you. If you refuse, you'll be seen as having a bad attitude, and they will keep you in detention and keep beating you. Lee said that the basement that he was kept in was in a secret location where he could not see outside and lost all concept of time. He also said that he tried to hurt himself and thought of suicide often because he said that it would have been better than what he was subjected to. I couldn't sleep. After you've been in there a week, death starts to look better than staying there. I bashed myself against the wall to self-harm, he said. One time in there, I was groggy, and I was trying to open my eyes, but I couldn't. 4 or 5 of them grabbed me by the arms and legs and pinned me to the ground. They injected me with drugs and brought me back to consciousness. Reports on China's prosecution of Christians are hardly new. The Daily Wire highlighted a report last summer about how communist officials in China were reportedly forcing Christians to renounce their faith and remove religious symbols from their homes, replacing them with portraits of Chairman Mao and President Xi Jinping, or face being cut off from welfare services. Major League Baseball will say nothing about this. The NBA will say nothing about this. Apple will say nothing about this. All of them have spoken out on Georgia's voting laws. Not a single one of them will say anything about the persecution of Christians in China. The Chinese torture people to renounce their faith in God, and American corporations are perfectly happy to do business over there. Think about that for a minute. These companies are perfectly willing to speak up about a election integrity bill in Georgia, but won't say a word about torturing Christians in China or running concentration camps because they want the money.
30.
That should, to some degree, tell you how we need to respond as people is make them feel the hurt financially. If they're not even going to speak up for the persecution of religious dissidents in China, maybe we need to be more aggressive in making them feel economic pain in this country through legislation, regulation, and boycott. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. I am delighted to have you with me. Happy Easter. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. My buddy Dave Briggs is going to join me at the bottom of the hour. He was with Fox and Friends for a while, went over to CNN, worked for NBC Sports. Huge sports guy, but way more into sports than I will ever be. And I want to pick his brain about Major League Baseball deciding to bail on Georgia. Although they're not pulling all of their games, just one. If it was such a big deal to them, you would think they would pull all of their games, but they're, of course, not doing that. Now, we'll get to the bottom of the hour and talk to Dave. Right now, though, we gotta switch topics because the Democrats have a big infrastructure bill that they are convinced is worth passing even without Republican votes. Chris Christie, of all people, calling him out on, Stephanopoulos' weekend show.
How many times have we said this on this program? If you're going to give governors, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, money from Washington that they don't have to get by raising taxes themselves, amen, baby. They're all going to say it, and I don't care whether you're talking about the most conservative Republican governor in America or the most moderate Republican governor.
There's a born-again Republican right there.
They're going to say, give me the money. That's what the governors always do, because then they don't have to raise taxes themselves. But here's the problem, and again, it goes along with the deceit of this White House. And there is no doubt there's deceit. The COVID bill, a fraction of the COVID bill was about COVID. Now we have an infrastructure bill. A fraction of the infrastructure bill is about infrastructure.
Oh, but it depends on how you define infrastructure.
Oh, no. Now the care economy is infrastructure, George. The care economy. I don't even know what the hell the care economy is. But you know what? It's now a huge part of an infrastructure.
I think you do go to services for Easter. You're a little worked up here.
I was praying already for you this morning, Rob, believe me.
Now, wait a second. I just noticed something here. Listen, George Stephanopoulos pushes back. Listen to Christie again. I played this clip in the first hour on the Stacey Abrams situation.
17 days is not enough early voting.
Well, Stacey Abrams, by the way, Stacey Abrams was in New Jersey, in my state, praising Phil Murphy this week for a voting law where New Jersey early voting is 9 days. Half of what Georgia is. Yet she's on TV in New Jersey, I saw it myself, saying that this is one of the greatest voting expansion bills we've ever seen. But this is Jim Crow? I'm sorry, George. Doesn't make any sense.
Listen to George Stephanopoulos at the very end there wanted to defend Abrams and then wants to defend the infrastructure bill. Funny how that works. House Democrats who held on to their seats in places where voters chose former President Donald Trump in 2020 could wield enormous power over the infrastructure plan, according to the Washington Examiner. Republican groups plan to push those vulnerable Democrats to outline an explicit position on raising taxes, which they then aim to weaponize in a messaging. 7 House Democrats, Cindy Axon, Sherry Bustos, Jared Golden, Alyssa Slotkin, Andy Kim, Matt Cartwright, and Ron Kine represent districts Trump won in 2020. With the margins of her newly cut down to fewer than 10 members, Nancy Pelosi must likely keep at least some of her Trump country members in line to vote for a package that Republicans have indicated they won't support. Nancy Pelosi can only lose 3 Democratic members. The Washington Examiner reached out to all 7 offices this week to ask whether the members support tax hikes in Biden's proposal or the revival of a state and local tax deduction that was not in it. None responded. A small number of House Democrats have said they will push to remove caps on the state and local or SALT deduction, but many of the most vulnerable Democratic members have not outlined where they stand on the specifics of the tax reforms in the bill. That's one. Now, one other story for the Washington Examiner. We're often told to follow the science. This is true of wearing masks, how we teach children to read, and addressing the perils of climate change. So we should probably better do the same with the economy, no? Consider the new Congressional Budget Office report on that very issue, the budget, the economy, and how we tax it. Let's assume that we want the federal government to spend lots more money on infrastructure. I don't, because I'm certain the money will be sprayed up the wall like the last trillion were. This is Tim Worstel at the Washington Examiner. Still, the CBO report is useful in laying down the basic science of taxation. Whatever we tax, we get less of it. Tax corporations, there will be less corporate activity. Tax the income from capital investment, there will be less investment. Tax labor incomes, and fewer will work hard to make the money. Put simply, people get less than doing something, they'll do more of it. Well, the CBO is essentially saying that if you raise taxes on corporations as Joe Biden wants to, you will reduce the amount of revenue coming from those corporations. And Biden needs that money. He's desperate for that money for his infrastructure rollout. Now, Roy Blunt was on TV this weekend. Roy Blunt is the former, his son was the governor of Missouri. He was in the House of Representatives. He was leader. He ran for the Senate. He's in the Senate. This is his last term. Roy Blunt said that if Biden makes the infrastructure proposal about infrastructure, he's going to get it passed with a bipartisan basis. But they have no desire to make it an actual bipartisan infrastructure plan. They intend to push it through with no support of Republicans. U.S. President Joe Biden would be willing to push through the infrastructure plan without the support of Republican lawmakers if he can't reach a bipartisan deal, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm said Sunday. Granholm said Biden would prefer that his plan have Republican backing, but if that does not work, he would likely support using a procedural strategy called reconciliation to allow Democrats to pass it in the Senate. As he said, he was sent to the presidency to do a job for America, and as the vast majority of Americans, Democrats and Republicans across the country support spending on our country and not allowing us to lose the race globally, he's going to do that. Now, how does this actually work? You get one bite at the apple every year with reconciliation. What the Democrats are saying, essentially, is that they're going to revise the budget of the United States. And in revising the budget, they think they should get another stab at reconciliation. And then they want to use their next fiscal year's reconciliation package this year, because the fiscal year starts in October. So they want 3 bites at the reconciliation apple this year. They got to see if the Senate parliamentarian will let them, and then they can overrule the parliamentarian if they so choose. They're bullying the Senate parliamentarian into letting them. It's something even Mitch McConnell didn't do. They want to pass this through. Roy Blunt on Sunday urged Biden to scale back the plan if he wants Republican lawmaker support. If we go back and look at roads and bridges and ports and airports, and maybe even underground water systems and broadband, you're still talking about less than 30% of the package. Blunt believes $615 billion would be more palatable. Roger Wicker of Mississippi joined others in his party trying to cast Biden's plan as a tax hike rather than an effort to repair and rebuild the country. Biden's plan would raise the corporate income tax after deductions to 28% from Donald Trump's 21%. Trump had lowered it from 35 to 21. Now, Biden wants to jack it to 28. Joe Manchin of West Virginia is saying that's a non-starter. The governor of Mississippi was on this weekend, Governor Reeves, talking about this plan. Here's what he had to say about it. He was on, I forget what show this was.
Let's turn to President Biden's new infrastructure bill. The American
That would
Society
be Jake
of Civil
Tapper, so
Engineers
CNN.
gives your state a D- for your roads and bridges. Almost 1 in 10 bridges in Mississippi are structurally deficient. The number of roads in poor condition is double the national average. A winter storm just knocked out water in your state capital for weeks. This legislation would commit more than $100 billion to fix roads and bridges. Could Mississippi use the help?
Well, there's no doubt that Mississippi could use our fair share of $100 billion. The problem with this particular plan, though, is although the Biden administration is calling it an infrastructure plan, it looks more like a $2 trillion tax hike plan to me. That's going to lead to significant challenges in our economy. It's going to lead to slowing GDP, and it's going to lead to Americans losing significant numbers of jobs. Infrastructure, Jake, is an area where Republicans and Democrats ought to be able to come together and do something good for the country. But as you mentioned, this plan spends $110 billion on roads and bridges and spends more than that on the combination of Amtrak and public transit. And what's even worse, it spends $100 billion on clean water, which Mississippi could certainly use, but it spends more than that on subsidizing electric vehicles. $155 billion to subsidize electric vehicles. That is a political statement It's not a statement on trying to improve our infrastructure in America. And so it looks more like the Green New Deal than it looks like an infrastructure plan. But if the Biden administration will do what the president has said he wants to do, which is work with Republicans, I believe we can come up with a plan that we can afford, one that we can pay for, and one that truly invests in the infrastructure needs of this country. And there's no doubt that Mississippi, like virtually every other state, could use federal support.
Now, let me focus on one part of this. The Biden administration wants to pour a bunch of money into Amtrak and rail. Out of the gate, let me just say that if there were reasonable places for passenger rail in this country, the private sector would do it. Joe Biden loves rail. Joe Biden notoriously takes the train from Delaware to D.C., or at least he did when he was not president. When he was vice president, he'd take Amtrak all the time. Amtrak this past Wednesday released the first outline of a proposal that would jumpstart expansion of its passenger rail system. The plan was unveiled in the wake of the $2 trillion jobs and infrastructure proposal from Joe Biden that would modernize Amtrak's Northeastern Corridor line with $80 billion. And he wants to, Amtrak does, show what is possible. Now, here's some of the bizarre things that Amtrak wants to do. Amtrak wants to do a new line from Nashville, Tennessee to Chattanooga to Atlanta to Macon, Georgia to Savannah, Georgia. So you can take a train from Savannah all the way to Nashville. They want a line from Birmingham all the way up to Charlotte, North Carolina via Atlanta. They want a line that goes from Milwaukee, Wisconsin all the way up to Duluth, Minnesota. They want to upgrade lines and add lines that go from Seattle to Chicago. They want to upgrade and add all sorts of other lines around the country. They want to build a new line from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Here's the thing. Some of these lines, let's take the Los Angeles to Las Vegas line. It's possible that would be a reasonable line. And the reason I say that is because there is a lot of traffic that goes from LA to Las Vegas. You build a high-speed rail there, do it. But the private sector would have already done it, except for government red tape. Get the government red tape out of the way, the private sector could do it. But there's a larger issue here. It is cheaper to go from Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles on Delta Airlines than it is to go from Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles on Amtrak. Not only is it cheaper, but it takes way less time. To go from Atlanta, Georgia to Los Angeles on Delta, you go from Atlanta to Los Angeles, and it takes about 4 hours. And flights, oftentimes you can find between $300 and $500. To go from Atlanta to Los Angeles on Amtrak, you go from Atlanta to Birmingham to Meridian, Mississippi, to New Orleans, to Houston, to San Antonio, to El Paso, to Tucson, to Indio, California, to Riverside, California, to Los Angeles, California. It takes you about 24 hours to get there and costs you just the same as flying on Delta. We don't need rail in this country in the way Amtrak envisions it. We simply do not need rail. There are people who are afraid of flying. Well, you know what? Get a car or get on a bus. You don't need this passenger rail line. There are routes like, for example, Los Angeles to Las Vegas that would probably work. Frankly, a Nashville to Savannah line might just work, or a Birmingham to Charlotte line might just work. But when you look at the schematics, like, for example, there is this fantasy. I live in Middle Georgia. There's this fantasy of running a line from Macon, Georgia to Atlanta. It's about an hour from my house to the Atlanta airport. I can drive faster than the train would go. There's a fantasy about building a line from Atlanta, Georgia to Nashville, Tennessee. If you actually look at the way Amtrak plans it, it would take you 2 hours longer by train than by car to drive it. Now, what the Amtrak advocates say is that, it's going to take longer because of traffic over time, and you don't have to hit traffic on the train. Except you do, because the train has to hit commercial train transit as well. And commercial train transit, although it supposedly has to allow passenger trains to move with priority, never does. There's no reason for these lines. There's no reason for this infrastructure upgrade for Amtrak. Certainly, some of the lines in the Northeast probably do need some upgrade, but this national rail system, we've already got airlines, and the airlines do a job. It gets you there faster for the same or less cost. We're living in fantasy land if we think that this Amtrak rollout is worth anything. And the reason Amtrak focuses on the Northeast Corridor is, one, it owns the tracks there, and so it's more efficient. It can do minimal high-speed rail. It's not that high-speed. But also, the media loves it because that's where the press goes. The press constantly takes the Acela from New York to Washington. It's a business class service, costs about $100 some odd to do, and they do that all the time because it's faster than taking a plane. And so the press loves the Acela corridor, and they think the entire nation is like that. They've never had to be on Amtrak from Washington to Atlanta. I had to one time because of a snowstorm, and it's not the greatest experience. It also took 12 hours. It took longer than if I had rented a car and drove, except there was a snowstorm. This isn't viable, and that the Democrats think it is another reason why the Republicans should kill the plan.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Eric.
It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she said if you use the word surge, it's white supremacy. I wish I was making that up, but I'm not. She actually said that. Let me see if I can find the audio real quick here. It's worth paying attention to her ridiculousness when it comes to this sort of stuff. I mean, she actually said that it was white supremacy.
They want to say, what about the surge? Well, first of all, just gut check, stop. Anyone who's using the term surge around you consciously is trying to invoke a militaristic frame. And that's a problem because this is not a surge. These are children and they are not insurgents and we are not being invaded, which, by the way, is a white supremacist idea, philosophy. The idea that if an other is coming in the population, that this is like an invasion of who we are.
She's a bit of an idiot. Headline, this is today's New York Times. 25 in one car, a dire crossing ended in grief, hope, fear, and death as migration surges. Oh no, the New York Times is embracing white supremacist talking points by using the word surge. It's like the Democrats don't understand that people want the border protected. It's like they don't understand that Republicans they've latched onto something that people understand, that having this massive influx of people coming across the border maybe isn't a good thing, particularly in a time of global pandemic. Like global pandemics and terrorist attacks, you somehow makes you realize your border actually matters and controlling your border actually matters. And the fact that Democrats don't seem to understand this, the fact that Democrats don't seem to be engaged on this issue in a way that connects to the American public is one of the opportunities that Republicans are going to have moving forward. And I can tell you what's going to happen, by the way. You can already see the talking point shaping up that Republicans are more focused on the Major League Baseball boycotting Georgia and the border than they are the infrastructure plan. You can hear the talking point shaping up. The reality, however, is that the Republicans are focusing right where voters matter and are concerned. The Democrats are completely out to lunch on this. And it's going to come back on them next year. When we come back, I'm going to spend some time with my buddy Dave Briggs, talking about what the heck is baseball doing and the larger issue with sports, the decline of watching, whether or not it's people are tired of the politics or what. He's got some thoughts on this, and he knows way more about it than I do. So we'll have an actual sports enthusiast on the program with me to talk about it when we come back, right here on the Erick Erickson Show. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Thank you to them for their sponsorship. If you're in charge of a business and your business needs access to credit, needs loans, needs capital, 6 figures and higher, go to firstlibertyga.com. Spend 5 minutes with them. Firstlibertyga.com. See if y'all are a good fit together. They want to help you when banks really these days aren't. Firstlibertyga.com. Now, we got to turn to Major League Baseball. They've decided to pull the All-Star game out of the TP, the Brave Stadium up in Cobb County, and who knows where they're going to go. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, says come to California. California actually has some more restrictive voting policies than Georgia. To join me to talk about this, my buddy Dave Briggs. Dave, you know way more about professional sports than I ever will. Thank you first for joining me, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this.
Good to be here, brother. Always good to talk to you. Yeah, look, I mean, like a lot of things in politics today, I think both sides, the far right, the far left, are screwing over those in the middle, and that's the case here once again. I mean, you want my opinion on the voting rights restrictions? They were based on a lie. They were based on the lie that the election was stolen, but the rhetoric from the left is based on a lie about those very voting restrictions. And who gets hurt? The people get hurt that are in the middle. The small businesses get hurt. Cobb County gets hurt. 8,000 hotel rooms that had been reserved for the All-Star game. Those are the very people that get hurt. My take is I'm also very surprised that Major League Baseball would make this move. They are not the woke league that the NBA is. They are not even close to what the NFL is. I would say the most conservative of the 3 major sports, not just in terms of the players, but the fans, the owners, the executives across the board. So I was pretty surprised by the move, and I actually have to agree for once with Stacey Abrams. The move hurts the very wrong people, and I think in the end, this will hurt Major League Baseball. You saw what it did to the NBA last year when they put Black Lives Matter on the court. The ratings plummeted. Baseball needs all the help they can get. They are struggling to gain new fans. This ain't going to help them.
Yeah, it really does seem to be cutting off their nose to spite their face. It's not like they're going to have this massive influx of progressives watching baseball because they did this. No. They're not going to bring in new fans here. Now, let me stretch this out to a larger issue, though. One of the things that baseball says is, well, we had to do it because some of the players didn't want to show up. This seems to be across professional sports now, players pushing the leagues further socially to the left in ways that maybe don't resonate with the heart of fans.
Well, look, I think, again, it's very different for the NBA to say that.
Right.
Because you've got guys like LeBron James who are the most powerful people in the league, far more powerful than any NBA owner, and they are very civically minded. The NFL, same goes there, but that's just not the case with Major League Baseball. I hadn't heard of any high-profile players say that they refused to play in the All-Star game if it wasn't pulled. And let's just be honest about the numbers here. We're talking about 7 to 8% of Major League Baseball players are black. And again, not a very liberal, woke league. So I don't think it was going to be that big a deal among the players. Yeah, you might have had a player or two pull out, but I don't think this would have been as big a deal as Major League Baseball thought. And now what you've done is given your fans a reason not to watch. And you've given Brian Kemp, I think it's actually bolstered his chances down there in Georgia. It's given him some momentum there, and now he's suddenly on the side of Donald Trump, which is a bit ironic. But I think it was just a miscalculation. And, but I think once you've gone this direction in your Major League Baseball, this is who you are. You are now on that side of things. And I'll be interested to see where the game goes because you mentioned California. I've heard Colorado, which would basically not make a political statement. I don't think Colorado – I know for a fact the owners of the Rockies don't support the move that Major League Baseball made. That's just my own reporting. But if they do go to a Chicago or if they do go to a city that's trying to make a political statement, that would be a massive mistake by Major League Baseball. But at this point, nothing would stop.
Right. Yeah, and there's also the issue. Let's say they did go to California. You're going to not only move to make a political statement, but then the players are going to be taxed on the game in ways they wouldn't in a state like Georgia, just given the way the California income tax structure works.
Yeah, that's a whole nother animal. But, again, like what bothers me here is all the BS lies that are involved. As I mentioned, the voting restrictions started about a lie about the elections. And then the backlash on the left started about lying about this actual Senate bill. And now Atlanta, Cobb County officials are lying themselves, saying you're costing Cobb County $100 million in economic development. No, you are not.
Right.
Not by any means. Even in the rosiest case in the history of Major League Baseball, there was one game in New York that they estimated it was around $100 million. I don't think that's at all accurate. I think probably about half of that. Let's remember, your stadium there in Atlanta right now is about a third capacity because of COVID restrictions. Right. They're allowing about 13,500 fans. So if that plays out into July, which we all hope not, very minimal economic devastation there for Cobb County. But look, Cobb County certainly needs the money, needs the jobs, needs those hotel rooms full. But if you're talking about 14,000, 15,000 people, very minimal economic damage. I just think when you've got Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Tucker Carlson, all talking about Major League Baseball, that is a net major loss for baseball, and something that's going to hurt them throughout the rest of the season when they're struggling to attract fans on television or in the season.
Yeah, it does seem like people are going to move with their pocketbook. And again, to your point, baseball tends to have a more conservative audience than the NBA, for example, and they're just making their fans mad. Corporations right now seem like they're cutting off their nose to spite their face regularly. Baseball doing this. And then to your point as well, I'm glad you said that about Cobb County, because I heard that $100 million number and my first reaction was to fall out laughing. Even if it were the case, you're in a county that has shifted to the Democrats, and you've got all the local Democratic officials now saying we just gave you 2 Democrat senators and now you're doing this to us. They're really mad.
Yeah, Major League Baseball is actually hurting the people who opposed this very Senate bill. So really was a miscalculation. And that $100 million figure is just a lie. Now, where this goes from here is interesting, because the next fight that you're seeing is, okay, Joe Biden, okay, corporate America, if you're going to fight this, how are you going to stand silently and allow the Olympics to go to Beijing, the Winter Olympics coming up, a human rights abuser in every way, shape, or form? That's where this fight goes next. And if you're Joe Biden, if you're these corporations, you just exposed yet another hypocritical element that if you're going to oppose one thing, be consistent and stand up and say, USOC, you should never go to China until they stop locking up Muslim Uyghurs. Corporations should do the same thing, but they are silent when it comes to the Olympics. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think you're going to hear more and more about that in the weeks and months leading up to the Olympics. And it's just a major hypocritical element, but that's what our politics are today.
Yes, it is. Listen, thank you for talking about that. One more thing before you get out of here. What should, for example, the NFL or Major League Baseball, what do they do? Is there any way for them to come back and get some fan loyalty? I'm stunned at the number of people I know who are huge football fans who now tell me regularly either they drop out, they don't start watching until after the game started so they can avoid all the woke stuff they perceive, or they just don't watch the games anymore, even though they're fans. They keep up with the scores, and that's about it. Is there any reverse in this?
Well, I don't know that you can ever put the genie back in the bottle, but I will say I do watch a fair amount of sports, certainly less than I ever have, and that's not – I can't really put my finger on it, but I think what you're seeing, a national poll just came out from Yahoo last week that said a third of professional sports viewers say they are watching less because of the racial justice movement. So I think the less politics that they present on the field, the better. And I think all the leagues realize that. The NBA may be the exception. But I think the NBA realistically lost 10 to 15% of their fans forever because of what they did last year, and the numbers would reflect that. And the NFL as well. But I don't frankly see the movement as much as I did last year. Again, I'm watching a lot of sports today, and I do think they are making a conscious effort to keep it off of the broadcast and to move away from it somewhat. So, but I think the difficulty will be post-COVID, how you get people back into the seats. That's going to be a massive challenge just because people reevaluated where they're spending their money today. And I'm not sure they want to spend money on something that they believe does not align with their priorities. So I don't think Major League Sports, any of the big three, will ever get back to the numbers that they saw. Look at the Super Bowl ratings, a historic low. That had nothing to do with social justice, at least to my estimation. It's going to take a long time to rebuild trust. And Major League Baseball is the one that I don't think can, because their audience is just so old. Football and the NBA, their audiences are both very young, a cross-section of America, and they're going to be fine. This is a move I think baseball is going to regret for some time.
I think so. Dave, listen, it's always good to talk to you. At some point, we will synchronize our schedules and be able to have brown drinks and Instagram live streams again.
Yes, please. Let's do that. Lots to discuss, my friend.
Absolutely. Take care. Dave Briggs was with Fox and Friends for a number of years, moved to CNN after a stint at NBC Sports. Always great to talk to on these issues. He hits on an important point about baseball more so than the others. It's very much, not to compare it too much to NASCAR, but the demographics of a baseball fan tend to be more conservative and older than the NFL and the NBA. And those people in that demographic tend to feel more put upon by the cultural wokes today, and they're less forgiving of it. As a result, baseball could be undermining themselves significantly by pulling what they pulled, particularly when they did so based on a lie.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at
phone number here, if you want to be a part of the program and weigh in on all this boycott nonsense, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. We got a lot of other stuff happening around the around the area as well, and one of those things that I want to mention real quick is up in Canada. In Canada, just as in Great Britain, the police decided to raid churches. And in so doing, they tried to shut the churches down, and it didn't go over so well. Now, in the UK, police broke up a Good Friday service at a Catholic church. And they essentially forced all the people out. In Canada, they tried to break up a Catholic church consisting of Polish dissidents. And the Poles pushed back and forced the police out. And the Canadians have said now, well, it was only one police officer. But it was actually 4 police officers. You could see, this is the crazy thing. The Canadians were saying one police officer went into this church. And you can watch the video from the parishioners. It was 4 plus 2 plainclothes police officers. In the UK, they shut down this church. This is from Discern. British police shut down a Good Friday service at Christ the Church, Christ the King. Oh, this was a Polish one. Maybe I've gotten them confused. Christ the King Polish Church in South London, calling the gathering unlawful under the coronavirus regulations. No parishioners were fined or arrested. The church was made to close. No. I was right. Weird. So the Canadian was Polish as well. The Canadians, they tried to shut down a church, and the Canadian minister refused. Canadian pastor Arthur Pulowski lashed out at the Canadian police who tried to shut down his church, called them the Gestapo. The church was at 15% capacity in compliance with rules, and they essentially chased the Canadian, maybe the Canadians and the British that are going after the Poles. By the way, if my call screener is listening, I fixed the phone issue. You can actually call the program now, and it will get through to us. There was a phone issue. I had to go into a setting in our phone systems and change something. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. If you were getting a busy signal, I've got that fixed now. This infrastructure plan. Did you know what's going to help Nancy Pelosi? The Washington Free Beacon. Joe Schaffstel. Am I saying that right? Schaffstel. Yes, Joe. I know Joe. I can never pronounce his last name. I've got this. President Joe Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure plan includes a provision to boost electric vehicle use Nancy Pelosi will personally benefit from. Pelosi's husband, Paul, purchased between $500,000 and $1 million in Tesla in December. Biden's infrastructure plan will lead to a windfall for Tesla and its shareholders. On Wednesday, Biden unveiled a sweeping plan that sets aside $174 billion for electric vehicle subsidies, charging stations, and other provisions designed to push Americans into electric cars. Okay. Real world scenario here. My kids, they were on spring break last week. Now, because of my radio changes, I couldn't go on spring break with the kids. I had to work, so we kind of canceled everything we wanted to do. We didn't go anywhere. But on Saturday, the kids wanted to go to Atlanta. I got up Saturday morning and I looked. No traffic. An hour and 16 minutes to my office, which is the optimal case scenario. We showered, we got dressed, we hit the road. 2 hours and 30 minutes later, we got to Atlanta. Traffic in that, 30 minutes of getting ready to go had shifted so much. It was a mess. We had to take back roads up to Atlanta. And we get into Atlanta and we're driving around and we're stuck in traffic. And all I can think is, I have the gas warning comes on. We had enough gas to get up there, but we're stuck in traffic so much, my car signals low gas. I pull over. It takes all of 10 minutes or less. It had to be less than 10 minutes to fill up the gas tank to full, and off we went. And I was thinking this weekend, if we had an electric car, if we got a Tesla, we would be parked at least 30 minutes, assuming we could find a high-speed charger. It would be 30 minutes we would be stuck there when it was less than 10 to fill up my tank to full with gas and get on the road again. That is not practical. It's just not practical. And yet the federal government wants us to move to electric vehicles. The pipe dream of the electric vehicle. Listen, I've got friends who have electric vehicles and they love them. I got a buddy of mine who has a Tesla and he adores it. Now, if something goes wrong with it, it takes 6 months to get it fixed because Tesla has notorious supply chain problems for existing owners that you don't hear about when you're a potential purchaser. But the entire idea of having us all go from our big vehicles to small electric vehicles, I don't think it's going to work, particularly for people who have families of any size. I just don't see it as being practical. And this weekend, stuck in Atlanta traffic, made up my mind. David, calling from Franklin Springs, you're going to be next. Welcome.
Yes, Eric. Good morning. Enjoy your show.
Thank you.
During the special session that is coming up for redistricting, I want to see the legislature repeal the new election law they just passed. And I want to see them put an election law in place that exactly mirrors Delaware's. I think that'd be a good dose for the Democrats. And I'm ready for my Republicans here to grow a set. I want to see the House and Senate and Brian Kemp give it back to them.
Yep.
I'm sick of it.
You know what?
To move on.
Here's what I think they ought to do. Honest to goodness, David. Here's what the Republicans in Georgia should do. Pass RFRA. They haven't passed it because they didn't want corporations to not like us. Pass constitutional carry. No longer have permits to carry guns in Georgia. Pass the transgender sports ban. Do all of the things the Republicans in Georgia haven't wanted to do, lest corporations get mad at them. Now that corporations have been mad at them. And yeah, I think we should go past the Delaware election legislation. Do that and say we're doing what Delaware does.
To all your listeners out there, go to the website of the legislature and email and call your legislators and advise them to do all these things. It's time for us to take a stand.
And, you know, David, we're going to have that special session. You're right. They got to draw the new lines. So draw the lines and pass Delaware's election plan. Look, I think that's a good plan. David, thank you for the advice. The phone number, if y'all want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I got a little more on that I want to talk about when we come back. But also Ron DeSantis. The media is freaking out about DeSantis uniting the Republican Party. The one thing the Democrats can't have right now is a united Republican Party. DeSantis looks most likely to be able to unite the non-Trump and the pro-Trump factions of the GOP. So 60 Minutes ran a hit job on him. They edited out some of his statements to make him look worse, and they willfully distorted his use of Publix grocery stores to get the vaccine spread. It's amazing the hit job they did. Hi there. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. CBS News is out attacking Ron DeSantis. They have selectively edited an interview with DeSantis to make it sound bad. And they left out his pushback on their arguments over what he actually said. Let me play you some audio. This is DeSantis on the 60 Minutes interview.
We wanted to ask Governor DeSantis about the deal, but he declined our request for an interview. We caught up with him south of Orlando.
Publix, as you know, donated $100,000 to your campaign, and then you rewarded them with the exclusive rights to distribute the vaccination in Palm Beach.
So first of all, what you're saying is wrong.
How is that not pay to play?
That's a fake narrative. I met with the county mayor. I met with the administrator. I met with all the folks at Palm Beach County, and I said, here's some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites. We can give more to hospitals. We can do the Publix. And they said, we think that would be the easiest thing for our residents.
But Melissa McKinley, the county commissioner in the Glades, told us the governor never met with her about the Publix deal.
The criticism is that it's pay to play,
And it's
Governor.
wrong. It's wrong. It's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative, and you don't care about the facts because obviously I laid it out for you in a way that is irrefutable.
Well,
and so it's clearly not.
Isn't there the nearest Publix to the Glades is
you're
30
wrong.
miles
You're wrong.
away?
You're wrong. Yes,
That's
sir.
Actually
Yeah, now they cut it all out here. They don't want to point out the reason he chose Publix. And for those of you who are just tuning in and you got no idea what's going on here, 60 Minutes ran a story on Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. They are alleging that Ron DeSantis collaborated with Publix grocery stores to steer the vaccine to Publix grocery stores because Publix pharmacies gave him $100,000 in campaign contributions. What they left out of the story is that Publix gave Adam Putnam, who ran against him in the Republican primary, more money than DeSantis. What they also left out of the story is that in the major urban areas of Florida, 97% of the population lives within 3 minutes. Let me say this again. In the major population areas of Florida, the average person lives within 3 minutes of a Publix. In the rural parts of Florida, they also live within 15 minutes of a Publix. Why? Because Publix is the largest grocery store chain in the state of Florida. But now there's this. This is the director of Florida's emergency management program. He's a 3-term Democrat who is in charge of the emergency management program in Florida. 60 Minutes left out this fact. The idea that Publix was picked for political reasons is nonsense. We, the emergency management system, reached out to all pharmacies, and they were the only one who at the time could execute on the mission. The federal government delayed the federal pharmacy program, and we yet again stepped up to serve more seniors. The Florida governor chose Publix because we recommended Publix. What? That's right. The Florida government chose Publix. The Florida governor chose Publix as the pharmacy to help administer the COVID vaccines because the Democrat director of emergency services in Florida recommended it. And why? Because the other pharmacies weren't ready. No one from the governor's office suggested Publix. It's just absolute malarkey, he says. And yet they don't actually want to provide you the full statement from Ron DeSantis, wherein he points out that it was emergency management that recommended it, not his office. They don't want to point out that Publix is the largest grocery store chain in Florida. They don't want to point out any of this stuff because they need to attack Ron DeSantis now. They need to attack him because it looks like he may be the Republican frontrunner in 2024 who can unite all wings of the Republican Party. The Daily Wire has this. Publix Democrat state official blasts absolutely false and offensive 60-minute smear of DeSantis. Florida's largest grocery store chain and a Florida state official who is a Democrat slammed 60 Minutes. The segment featured reporter Cheryl Afonzi ambushing DeSantis at a press conference last month and aggressively questioning him about a misleading narrative about the way he responded to the coronavirus pandemic. 60 Minutes edited the interaction to remove nearly the entire portion of DeSantis' response, in which he thoroughly answered the question and diffused the central point of the segment. Alfonsi tried to suggest that Publix, the largest grocery store chain in Florida, had engaged in pay-to-play by donating money to DeSantis' campaign in exchange for being awarded a contract to distribute vaccines in the state. The irresponsible suggestion that there was a connection between the campaign contributions made to the governor and our willingness to join other pharmacies in support of the vaccine distribution effort is false and offensive, Publix said in a scathing statement. We are proud of our pharmacy associates for administering more than 1.5 million doses of the vaccine to date and for joining other retailers in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia to do our part. Former Florida State Representative Jared Moskowitz, a Democrat, slammed 60 Minutes over the segment, saying DeSantis' office did not push for selecting Publix. Moskowitz is the director of Florida's Division of Emergency Management. He's overseen the state's response to the pandemic, including rolling out the vaccine distribution. Their office suggested Publix, not the governor's office. Now, I want to play for you again this clip because you need to understand again exactly how selectively edited the clip was. This is what was actually shown on 60 Minutes versus what was actually aired. Here's the 60 Minutes clip.
We wanted to ask Governor DeSantis about the deal, but he declined our request for an interview. We caught up with him south of Orlando.
Publix, as you know, donated $100,000 to your campaign, and then you rewarded them with the exclusive rights to distribute the vaccination in Palm Beach.
So first of all, what you're saying is wrong.
How is that not pay to play?
That's a fake narrative. I met with the county mayor, I met with the administrator, I met with all the folks at Palm Beach County, and I said, here's some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites. We can give more to hospitals. We can do the Publix. And they said, we think that would be the easiest thing for our residents.
But Melissa McKinley, the county commissioner in the Glades, told us the governor never met with her about the Publix deal.
The criticism is that it's pay to play,
and it's
Governor.
wrong. It's wrong. It's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative, and you don't care about the facts.
Now, here's what they actually left out of the transcript that is important. That's a fake narrative. So first of all, this is DeSantis. First of all, the first pharmacies that had it were CVS and Walgreens, and they had a long-term care mission. So they were going into long-term care facilities. They got the vaccine in the middle of December. They started going to the long-term care facilities the third week of December to do long-term care. That was their mission. That was very important. We trusted them to do that. And we got into January. We wanted to expand the distribution point. So yes, you had the counties. You had some drive-through sites. You had hospitals that were doing a lot, but we wanted to get it into the community. So we reached out to other retail pharmacies, Publix, Walmart. Obviously, CVS and Walgreens had to finish that mission. And we said, we're going to use you as soon as you're done with that. For Publix, they were the first one to raise their hand and say they were ready to go. And you know what? We did it on a trial basis. I had 3 counties. I actually showed up that weekend and talked to seniors across 4 different Publix. How was the experience? Is it good? Should we go with this? And it was 100% positive. So we expanded it, and then folks liked it. And I can tell you, if you look at a place like Palm Beach County, they were kind of struggling at first in terms of senior numbers. I met the county mayor, I met with the administrator, I met all the folks in Palm Beach County, and I said, here are some of the options. We can do more drive-through sites, we can do more hospitals, we can do more Publix. That's the section you heard. We can do this. They calculated that 90% of their seniors live within 1.5 miles of a Publix, and they said that would be the easiest for our residents. Notice CBS News cut out that portion where they said we calculated 90% of their seniors live within 1.5 miles of Publix. We think that would be easiest. So we did that. And what ended up happening was you had 65 Publix grocery stores in Palm Beach. Palm Beach is one of the biggest counties, one of the most elderly communities. We've done almost 75% of the seniors in Palm Beach. And the reason is because you have a strong retail footprint. So our way has been multifaceted. It has worked. And we're also now very much expanding CVS and Walgreens now that they've completed the long-term care mission. 60 Minutes cut all of that out. 60 Minutes cut all of that out. They cut out the portion where it was the government of Palm Beach that said, do 60 Minutes. Or, I'm sorry, do Publix, because people live within reach of Publix. Again, DeSantis's words. 90% of seniors live within a mile and a half of a Publix in Palm Beach County. That's why they went with Publix. And also, it was the Department of Emergency Management that chose Publix. The governor's office did not recommend it and had nothing to do with it. They're accusing DeSantis of pay to play and also trying to drag public supermarkets to do it. But you know what? They don't like Publix anyway. Do you know why they don't like Publix? Christian. Up until the last few years, if you went into Publix, they had Christian music playing in the stores. Publix is even closed on Easter. I know this firsthand because yesterday I pulled out the butterball turkey I'd gotten and thawed out in the fridge, and when I cut it open, it stunk to high heaven. There was no way I could cook it. And I couldn't go to Publix. I had to go to the pagans at Kroger to get a new turkey to cook yesterday. Thankfully, they had one thawed out, so I could still do the turkey yesterday on the rec deck. Took way longer than I thought it would, but nonetheless, I was able to smoke the turkey thanks to the pagans at Kroger being open when the good Christians at Publix were closed. They don't like Publix because Publix tends to support Republicans. Remember, the family that owns Publix gave money to Donald Trump, so they're persona non grata in the media. And now they're peddling this story to go after DeSantis and Publix because they've got to take out DeSantis now. DeSantis unites the anti-Trump and the pro-Trump factions of the GOP right now. And so here they come for him. Here they come calling. They've got to damage DeSantis. And I don't think they're going to. If anything, I think this helps DeSantis. I think people will gravitate to DeSantis because of this stuff, because the media constantly does this. They find whoever you think is the front runner in the GOP and they bash the snot out of them, hoping to get rid of them lest the party can unite. More and more people, though, recognize that when the media comes out to get you, you're probably doing a good job.
You can follow Erick around social.
welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Wes Cantrell is in the State House. I hope that our caller David from Franklin Springs is listening, because Wes Cantrell put this up about an hour ago on Facebook. This is a Georgia State Representative, Wes Cantrell. In recent days, President Biden called the new Georgia election integrity law un-American, sick, pernicious, and Jim Crow on steroids. In light of this, today I'm announcing my intentions to file legislation to address his concerns. The bill will be called the President Joe Biden Jim Crow on Steroids Voting Act. Since President Biden seems to be very concerned about our laws here in Georgia, this bill will make Georgia's voting laws identical to those of his home state of Delaware. As a result, it will have 5 key features. Instead of having up to 19 days of early voting in Georgia, we will have 0 days of early voting, just like Delaware. Instead of having no excuse absentee voting in Georgia, we will have to be sick or disabled to vote absentee, just like Delaware. Instead of having plenty of secure drop boxes in Georgia, there will be no drop boxes, just like Delaware. Instead of being able to get food and drink from a non-poll worker outside of the 150-foot barrier and drink from poll workers within the barrier of Georgia, it'll be illegal to receive anything of value standing in any portion of the line, just like in Delaware. Instead of being able to vote in the quiet of Georgia, your name will now be announced out loud along with your party affiliation during a primary so that your vote can be challenged by anyone in the precinct, just like Delaware. I look forward to all my colleagues who voted against our election integrity law begging to co-sponsor this legislation with me. I have some advice for President Biden. Take care of your own home state before you say a word about Georgia. People in glass houses shouldn't be throwing stones. Either read the bill for yourself or at least get some advisors who will tell you the truth. Congratulations on your 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post. And you didn't just spread misinformation once, you did it again and again. Delaware's voting laws are draconian when compared to Georgia. Until you bring election reform to your home state of Delaware, it's probably best you sit this one out. To use your favorite phrase, come on, man. That's Wes Cantrell, state representative from Georgia. Good for him. Going to introduce legislation to conform Georgia's laws to New York's law, or to Delaware's laws, and also saying that as a fallback, we can embrace Chuck Schumer's concerns, and instead of having 19 days of early voting, have 9 days of early voting, just like New York, and instead of having no excuse absentee voting, will require an excuse to vote just like they do in New York and Delaware. Not a bad idea. I mean, they want to highlight supposed changes in Georgia's law. Now, here's something I got to say about the Georgia law. I actually mean this sincerely and honestly, because I agree with people on the left who say that Georgia changed its laws because of the lie about a stolen election. The election wasn't stolen in Georgia. No one, including people on the Trump team. In fact, I know the people who were in charge of the election on the ground in Georgia for the Trump team, and they say very publicly that there was no theft. The Democrats just outmaneuvered Republicans. So Republicans are changing the laws in Georgia because of that lie. But pay attention to this. Pay attention before you get mad at me and change the channel. Republicans are not changing the laws in Georgia to steal the election from Democrats. Republicans are changing the rules in Georgia to convince Republicans they've done something to fix the laws. Republicans in Georgia psychologically at this moment are convinced that the Democrats have stolen the election and are using the absentee ballot process to do so. So Republicans are now tying photo ID to absentee ballots. It's widely popular across parties, across races, across genders, across ideologies, across incomes. And the Democratic bellyaching is really what is helping Republicans be convinced that the law changes were good and substantive. In the grand scheme of things, they didn't do a massive amount. What they did provoked maximum response from the Democrats, and that is what is helping Republicans be convinced that the elections will no longer be stolen. Yes, Democrats are right. The Georgia election wasn't stolen, but Democrats are wrong when they think what the Republicans are now doing is to steal the election. Actually, the law changes, they don't really do that. In fact, if anything, they make it easier to vote because they will expand the number of precincts to reduce the number of the long wait and long lines. But what it does psychologically is it convinces Republicans that the Republicans made sure the process is fair, but also that it can be secure. And the more Democrats complain about it, the more likely it is the Republicans will internalize that something good was done. In fact, I suspect that the belly aching from the Democrats right now and the attacks on Brian Kemp help him get reelected in 2022. Republican disunity is a thing in Georgia right now. A lot of internal polling that I have seen shows that Stacey Abrams has been able to unite the Democrats at a level the Republicans have not been able to unite. And now suddenly the Republicans are uniting behind Brian Kemp because of this fight. It helps him. There are always some fringe wackadoos out there who will never, ever vote for Brian Kemp. They are very, very vocal about it. When push comes to shove, though, a lot of them will quietly go vote for him. But also, they don't have the numbers in the primary. I've seen the polling. Brian Kemp does very well against a cross-section of people who may run against him, and most of those people are already supporting him. I don't think they're going to abandon him. This fight helps Brian Kemp tremendously, as it should. Now, it also helps Stacey Abrams, but I don't think it helps Stacey Abrams in the general election when you've got Stacey Abrams and Democrats coming out there undermining Georgia's economy for a law that most people will support when they find out about it and they see it doesn't really disrupt their voting process next year. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Robert on Lake Oconee, you're going to be next. Welcome.
Hey, I just wanted to point out that the election would not have been different with the old law and new law, because in the last election, when they verified signatures, weren't they going to an official document to verify those signatures from?
Yeah, so the way the law had worked is they were supposed to use the voter registration card. The state had digitized all of that, and what the Secretary of State did is he actually said to use the voter registration card or the driver's license signature, whichever was more recent, because people's signatures can change. But they were running into a problem that I ran into myself. When I got my new driver's license, you've got to sign with one of those digital pins now. And so my driver's license signature doesn't really look like my real signature because of the way the digital pin processed it.
Well, I hear you there, and no dispute on that. But the point I was trying to make is they still had to use an official document to certify the person was able to vote. And so it would not have changed the outcome of the election at all.
No, it wouldn't have.
This law or that law.
It would not have. In fact, there's that audit now that supposedly is happening to Fulton County signatures. I'm not expecting them to find much. I think they did a good job, and it really is mythology that somehow they were able to rig the absentee votes. And there's this rumor running amok. Robert, thank you very much for the phone call there. The rumor running amok that people were copying absentee ballots and photocopying them and then scanning those. That wasn't true. All of these things have been dismissed, except a lot of people aren't hearing about the explanations. Like, for example, there was a photo and video of a warehouse where they had all sorts of ballots. And the allegation was that they were using these ballots and filling them out, and they were stuffing ballot boxes with these absentee ballots. That wasn't true. The reason that there were these excesses of ballots was because you could be damaged, there could be duplicates, you don't know how many you need. So they order a bunch, always order more than you need, and then they shred them after the election is over, the ones that aren't used. But yet people were concocting a conspiracy theory that somehow the ballots were they were stored in this warehouse so that if we need X number of ballots to steal the election, we're going to do it. Wasn't actually the case. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Are schools going back to normal? Will they? There's a story in the Washington Post now. Now, for those of us in most southern states who may be listening to this program, in the Midwest, a lot of our schools are back to normal. But in a lot of blue states, they're not. In a lot of blue states, they are not going back to school. Parents, students, and teachers exhausted by the false starts, union battles, quarantines, and remote learning that have upended the school year are looking around the bend with an urgent, fretful question. Come fall, will schools at last be back to normal? The likely answer, sort of, but not really, and not for everybody. School districts across the country are planning to return to full-time in-person classes this fall, but some are planning for hybrid systems, combining in-person and remote learning. All teachers and staff who want vaccinations will have them. Kids won't. Masks and other mitigation measures will remain in large parts of the country. Some administrators anticipate lunch in the cafeteria again. Others say kids will have to eat in classrooms still. Some say sports can come back, others not. Some say choir can come back, others not. It's all over the system, all over the nation. Biden said we were going to get back to normal. And yet many districts don't want to go back to normal. This is going to be another quiver that the Republicans have in their bag when it comes to the 2022 election. There are going to be lots and lots of complaints as the Republicans fire up. And frankly, I still think that the GOP needs to get on the same page on pushback on some of these woke corporations and boycotting them. Let's go to the phones again. Randy in Rome, you're going to be up next. Welcome.
Morning, Eric. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I am well. It's a beautiful day. Listen, and by the way, in Rome, our education is up and normal. Okay? There's a few things, but most of it's normal. In the county, the city, all of it. Now, my original thought: why don't Republicans become activists like we've seen all these groups and Democrats become activists? Why don't we go out I say we? I'm a nominal Republican. I'm a conservative, but I go. You can convince me one way or the other.
Yeah.
But why don't we have, water? Why don't we go and say every precinct's going to have water? Or churches come and say, hey, we'll donate to the county, to the election, to the precincts. And one church says, we'll bring all the water you ever want to give to anybody that's standing in line, with no strings attached. Just here's some water. Here's a bottle of water. Why don't we have pop-up places to go and get IDs? So you can go and get your IDs just in case, or pop-up or in the special session. Why don't we change the nuance there and put a few more drop boxes in places and maybe open that up? There are simple things to change the optics here, and I know it's all about the filibuster, but we can do some simple things to change the optics of what this all looks like instead of looking like a bunch of conservative white guys in a back room signing something with people banging on the door.
Well, keep in mind that the media is going to characterize Republicans as negatively as they can all the time. But to your point, one thing Republicans have got to get better at is being activists. For example, National Review, actually, hang on one second. Somebody just sent this to me. The documented cases of Democratic abuses at the polls requiring the change for the food and drink rule. Republicans could be doing these things, and they never do. You're right. Republicans could be organizing churches to pass out water at the polls. They could be doing that, and they don't. Republicans could be organizing bus drives from churches to go vote, and they don't. The number of evangelical white churches are like, oh, we can't even talk about Election Day in our church, is massive compared to black churches. There is a huge discrepancy there. On election, this is from National Review, Ryan Mills. On Election Day 2018, Matthew Wilson arrived at his polling location and saw a long line of voters outside the suburban Atlanta high school. The first-time Democratic candidate for the State House of Representatives ordered 4 pizzas and handed out slices to the people in line, while a campaign worker photographed it all and then posted pictures on social media, according to a local newspaper account. 2 years later, in the run-up to the 2020 general election, Georgia State Representative Roger Bruce and a local county commissioner were photographed handing out snacks to voters waiting in line at a courthouse in an Atlanta exurb. Bruce, a Democrat running unopposed for re-election, wore a State Representative Roger Bruce t-shirt. These are just 2 cases Georgia election leaders are investigating for possible violations of state law, including allegations of vote buying and illegal campaigning within 150 feet of a poll location. Both Wilson and Bruce have denied knowingly violating the law. A Republican effort to rein in the practice known as line warming by clarifying that the law prohibits offering any gifts, including food or drinks, within 150 feet of a polling location may be the most controversial, misunderstood, and mischaracterized provision of Georgia's new voting security law. Left-wing critics have seized on the food and drink provision to characterize the law as a racist attempt to disenfranchise minority voters. President Biden cited the provision, telling reporters, you don't need anything else to know that this is nothing but punitive, designed to keep people from voting. Cowed by activists, Major League Baseball pulled out of the All-Star game over that objection in that provision. The food and drink provision of Georgia's new law is based on a similar provision from New York State's election law, said Senate Majority Leader Mike Dugan. By the way, it's worth noting that in the John Ossoff race against Karen Handel in the 6th Congressional District special election in 2017, Planned Parenthood protesters wearing Planned Parenthood shirts were passing out water bottles labeled with Planned Parenthood as voters were standing in line at the polls. There's a history of this happening in Georgia, and the Republicans moved to stamp it out, and that wasn't a bad idea. Now back to the phones. Bob, we're going to you. Welcome, Bob. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Doing well. Thank you for taking the call, and I enjoyed both of your shows.
Thank you.
Fun to listen. You sent out an email update, I believe it was the morning of March 26th, and you quoted, I think it was a UGA poll that indicated that there was very much nearly equal acceptance of the new Georgia law among minorities as well as non-minority people. and I have actually tried to locate that poll, and I can't find it. Can you cite that?
Yeah. Now, it's only one provision of the law. It is the using photo ID for absentee ballots. Hang on
okay.
1 second. Let me. If you let me see if I can find. It's an AJC. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, if you type into Google UGA AJC poll, you'll find the link to the AJC polling, and the very first one has that polling. And one of the questions is, do you support or oppose photo ID or other documentation in order to cast an absentee ballot? And what you will find is 74% support it. Another one is, do you support or oppose eliminating drop boxes? 59% oppose eliminating drop boxes. Do you support or oppose prohibiting the mass mailing of unsolicited absentee balloting? 47% oppose it, 49% support it, 3% don't know. And so in accordance with a lot of what the Republicans are doing, they've got majority support for sure for photo ID. They did not get rid of ballot drop boxes. 55% oppose getting rid of ballot drop boxes. I'm sorry, 59% oppose getting rid of the ballot drop boxes. And then it split evenly on the curtailing of unsolicited ballot absentee ballot applications. And that's one of the things they did. But it's specifically, though, what I was talking about in that piece is the photo ID for absentee ballots. The Democrats were saying that this was an egregious curtailing. Stacey Abrams, that was the very first thing she blasted. You'll notice that they moved on very quickly to other issues within the poll, because it turns out majority of Democrats, majority of Republicans, majority of black people, majority of white people, majority of men, majority of women, majority of poor people, majority of rich people, majority of liberals, majority of progressives, majority of conservatives all support photo ID. You can find that for yourself at the AJC with their polling. You know what's so interesting here as well, when you actually dive into this, is are you more concerned about limiting options or the potential for ineligible voters to cast ballots? 55% of those who are polled are more worried about ineligible voters than they are about limiting options. 55%. And so the GOP, with their efforts, were fairly in line with the polls. The Republicans were fairly in line with what voters wanted, which is one reason why the Democrats have to bellyache so much about it. It's one reason why the Democrats have to scream so much about the legislation without actually talking about what's in it, because most voters actually like what's in the polling. Now, when we come back, some thoughts on what else the Republicans need to do as they fight on this front.
National connections, local
Hello there and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. John Ralston is a Nevada pundit, and he was on TV this weekend talking about the rise of what he calls anti-trans bills. I want you to listen to this.
It reminds me, and I wrote a tweet about Trans Visibility Day on Friday, so much of what has gone on towards trans people. I don't think, you mentioned hate, it's ignorance, which of course often turns into fear and hatred. And you heard the governor there say that makes sense to me. It makes sense to him viscerally. I doubt he's done any research into the subject. But this whole issue of, quote, save women's sports is the same motivation that occurred when they tried to pass all the transgender bathroom bills, Jonathan, which was to imply that there is this wave of transgender people going into bathrooms to stalk, harass, and commit violence, just as if there is supposedly some wave of transgender kids now wanting to play youth sports and dominate because of their biological birth. This is nonsense. It's intended to divide, and unfortunately, even if it's born of ignorance, not hate, it is going to make things worse for trans folks. It is going to be divisive, and it is going to generate hatred and probably violence.
All right, folks. This is he leans Democratic, and this is a conventional wisdom issue on the left, that these are meant to divide, that it's meant to be divisive, and on it goes. The reality is this: there are a lot of parents in this country who are concerned about their daughters having to compete against boys on their sports teams. There are a lot of parents in this country who are concerned about boys coming into their daughters' restrooms. And you can say, if you're on the left, it's divisive, it's bigotry, it's what have you. But for a lot of people who aren't even on the right, it's an issue of protecting their daughters against boys. I would note that Georgia's Republican Party refused to advance a sports bill that would protect girls. They have refused to advance the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. They have refused to advance constitutional carry and other Second Amendment issues. In fact, the Speaker of the House killed a gun rights measure in the House, and he cited the shooting at the spas in Atlanta as one of the reasons for blocking the bill. Republicans in Georgia have refused tax reform to get rid of the income tax. They've refused all these things because they're worried about being liked. Maybe they need to stop worrying about being liked and start actually being conservative like they say they are. Maybe they need to go on and advance RFRA now. Go on and advance a late-term abortion ban. Go on and advance constitutional carry. Go on and advance protection of girls' sports legislation. Do all of these things and stop worrying about being liked by the left. Stop worrying about people on the left deciding whether or not you're worthy in some capacity. Fact of the matter is that they're never going to like you. And this is a lesson Republicans need to learn nationwide, not just in Georgia. It is why, frankly, I think you need to see Republican governors like DeSantis and Abbott and Ducey and the rest all coming out and announcing that they don't want the All-Star game. Say, nope, don't come to our state either. We're standing with Georgia. If you're going to believe lies, don't come to our state. There's got to be some conservative unity on these issues now. In Georgia, the Republican position has always been, we're going to be responsible, reasonable Republicans who don't alienate suburban moderates. Major League Baseball pulling out of Georgia over lies about a bill, I assure you, are going to have a radicalizing effect on those moderate suburban people who tend to vote Republican, and they're going to be more Republican. They're not going to be less. Seeing the Raphael Warnock come out and not call for companies to stop boycotting is going to radicalize people against him. having Raphael Warnock come out and engage in heresy. He's deleted the tweet now, apparently. Raphael Warnock tweeted that the message of Easter transcends Christ in some way. It is that it helping others here, helping others essentially saves yourself. Let me see if I can find the right. He's deleted it now. Raphael Warnock heresy tweet. Yeah, I bet that comes up. Yes, here it is. Yep, sure does. Raphael Warnock's tweet. It was, the meaning of Easter is more transcendent than the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Whether you are a Christian or not, through a commitment to helping others, we are able to save ourselves. There is literally no variant of Christianity under the sun where Christians believe that they can save themselves through their work. There is none. As a buddy of mine said, and he's being lit up by progressives for pointing it out, there is literally no variety or denomination of Christianity that holds that believers are saved by anything other than the blood of Christ. That is literally the one part that's not up for debate in Christianity, and yet you've got some people coming out there claiming otherwise. It's claiming it's a flavor of Christianity. There's literally no flavor of Christianity. It is literal heresy for Raphael Warnock, Georgia's senator, to come out and say that you can save yourself through your work. He has since deleted his tweet. Notice, by the way, one of the things that the left is doing these days is they're adopting long-time Christian rhetoric and they're twisting it. Warnock doesn't even do that. Warnock doesn't do that. I mean, he could have twisted this and said the hallmark of being a Christian is loving your neighbor and helping others. He doesn't say that. No, he says that you get your salvation through helping others, which is something that a Christian pastor would know is not true. And yet he tweeted it. Maybe he'll blame a staffer. Maybe some Warnock staffer will meet the underside of a bus today. We'll keep our eyes out for that. We will be back with you guys tomorrow, though. Y'all have a